Okay, so I've been meaning to make this video for a few weeks now after having a look at the £20 note and finding a few things that I thought were a bit weird. So there's loads of ground to cover here, so I'm going to canter through really quickly. So this was the thing that made me think there was something a bit strange about the £20 note to begin with. It was this symbol on the back here. And I just thought, that's a bit odd. That looks a bit like the coronavirus, or at least the different pictures that I've seen on it. I just thought it was a bit weird to begin with. And then what I thought was even more weird is the virus is that side, and when I flicked over, the crown is the other side. And speaking a tiny bit of Spanish, I thought, oh, that's weird, because crown in Spanish is corona. And then on the other side of the crown is the coronavirus. And I thought, it's just a bit of a daft coincidence. But being a bit bored in lockdown, I thought I'd take a little look into that. So first thing I did was went on the Bank of England website and tried to figure out exactly what that little purple symbol was all about. So if you scroll down and have a look, it's down here somewhere. It basically doesn't say much. It just says purple foil patch, contains the letter T, no explanation of why that's there, and you'll find it on the back of your note. So you struggle to find out what that is. But after doing a bit more research, I did manage to find that out, so I'll come to that in a bit. But just before I went on to that, I started thinking, well, coronavirus, let me just have a look up and make sure that I've got that right in terms of Spanish. So I thought, yep, Spanish is corona, English is crown. So crown, corona, interchangeable. And then I did get to thinking about what was it that made me think this little symbol here was like coronavirus. And there was one particular picture that I'd seen in the paper at some point, and it was this one. So that was the picture that I'd seen, and it just reminded me of that image there. So that's where this all started. So then I got to looking at the £20 note a bit more and started looking at all the different features. So this thing in the middle here, which turns out is the Margate Lighthouse with some things emanating out of it. Different bits and pieces. This square of 20s over here, this little window, lots of things going on this £20 note. And one of the things that really struck me, because I've never seen this on a note before, was this sort of hologram of these circles emanating out of this source of light. Blue on that side and red on this side. Different colours, but more of a blue on the front and a red on the back. And that made me think, well, corona, what do I know about corona? So I looked up the dictionary definition of corona. So this is dictionary.com. The first part of this, a white or coloured circle or set of concentric circles of light seen around a luminous body. So corona, light around a luminous body. Concentric circles around a luminous body. This luminous body here apparently being the Margate Lighthouse. So I thought that was interesting. But even more interesting then when I went to the second part of this, and it said in meteorology, a circle or set of circles having a small radius and ranging in colour from blue on the inside to red on the outside, which I thought was really interesting. And then from that, I started then thinking, well, this is a bit of a coincidence, isn't it? So we've got a corona, something that looks like a virus, and then also another reference to corona, because we've got concentric circles from something emitting light, blue on the front and red on the back. And then I started thinking, well, actually that's really strange. I'm going to look into this a little bit further. And as I started to do that, one of the very first things I came across was this thing here. So the COVID Recovery Commission, which is a commission that's been set up by government with employers. That's the symbol there. So you can see it's a circle in the middle with some dots in the middle, and then you've got 8 circles around the edge. Looks a little bit similar to this £20 note that was launched on the 20th of February 2020. So the COVID Recovery Commission, and the £20 note. So I started to dig into this a little bit further and trying to figure out exactly what actually they were saying this symbol was on the back. So I watched a video that was Mark Carney, the guy who is the chief exec of the Bank of England. And what he says is that that symbol is a representation of something called the Rotunda at the Tate Modern Gallery in London, which is essentially a staircase. So that's an overview of it. You'll notice the black and white, which is quite often symbolism in esoteric circles. So you've got a black and white rotunda there, which is the staircase, and that's the image of it. And then over here you've got some real photos of what that staircase looks like. So apparently that is what this symbol represents. So it's nothing to do with COVID. Allegedly, it's that staircase there. It's just got a random T in it, and it's just randomly in a slightly different direction. But I thought, okay, fair enough, that might just be a bit of a coincidence then. So I started then looking into this a little bit further, and the next thing that was interesting to have a look at is this guy here, William Turner, who's a painter, and a painting in the background. It wasn't a painting that I was familiar with, but it turns out this is a painting called The Fighting Temeraire. So I had a little look at this, Wikipedia, all about the Fighting Temeraire. Turns out it's Britain's #1 favourite painting, even though I've never seen this painting before in my life. Seen lots of the other top 10, even the top 20, but never this one. But it turns out that the BBC back in 2005 determined that this was Britain's favourite painting. So that in itself wasn't that interesting, but as you start to read up on the Fighting Temeraire, this is where this I thought got quite interesting. So it's an old ship being broken down. So an old warship being broken down is what catches most people's attention. So this thing that had served us well for a long time, fought in the Battle of Trafalgar, I think it was, and that was being broken down essentially for scrap. So that's the thing that typically catches people's eye in this painting. But as you look into it a little bit more, some really interesting other aspects of the symbolism as well. And the two bits that caught my eye in particular were these. So what it says is that on one side of the painting, the sun is setting above the estuary. Its rays extending into the clouds above it and onto the surface of the water. And the sun setting symbolises the end of an era. Whereas at the same time, a sliver of moon casts a beam across the river, symbolising the commencement of a new era. So I thought that was really interesting, given that we've got post-COVID, living through COVID, and then what pre-COVID, sorry, living through COVID and what post-COVID will be like, and the high likelihood we're going to see a new social contract, a new era, a very different world to the one we knew not so long ago, which just so happens to tie very neatly to this painting on the back of the £20 note that was launched on February this year. So we've got a painting that symbolises the end of one era and the start of another. William Turner I didn't really know much about, so I did a little bit of Google of William Turner. And one of the first things that cropped up when I Googled that was the fact that William Turner was known as the Painter of Light. So I did know Turner, but I didn't know that his nickname was the Painter of Light. Straight away, I thought that was a little bit odd because the only other guy who I know that sounds like he's got a similar nickname is Lucifer. So the bearer of light, Lucifer, quite a similar nickname to the guy on the back of our £20 note, the Painter of Light, with the new era, the new dawn, possibly the new world order. So yeah, I thought that was interesting, a little bit tenuous in some ways, but interesting, and see what other people think about that. The next thing that I then had a quick look at was back to this symbol again. I thought, well, what's all that about? So there's a T there. What could that T possibly be to do with? Maybe it's just 20. Seems a bit strange that you just put a T in that circle. So I then started doing a bit of searching in terms of a T in a circle. And one of the very first things that came up on that was various T's in circles. The one that was most interesting, which was literally on the first page that I found, was this. It's a T in a circle, again with 8 points. 9 points on this one, just hanging outside of the circle. Different points on each of them, but on this one, 9 points, a T in the middle, and this is the modern circle, which is from the works of Aleister Crowley, esoteric, satanic writings. Lots of people will know who Aleister Crowley is, but if you don't know, have a look. Mixed with lots of political figures and leading figures in society in Britain a number of years ago, and wrote some very interesting papers that were esoteric in nature and arguably satanic. And this is from his writings, where he's got a T inside a circle with some dots on the outside, and a T inside a circle with lots of dots on the outside. So yeah, that was a little bit odd. The next thing that I looked at was across on this side. So I found, you see here, we've got a square of 20s all in a row, and I thought, I know what that is. That's a magic square. My son's doing maths at the moment, and he's had to do some magic squares in maths. But as you look into magic squares, they are actually, as much as they are mathematical games, if you like, they're also symbolic, again, of the occult and esotericism. And I thought what was really interesting about this one is 20, 20, 20 on all sides. So if you add those up, of course, that's 60. The 0 is 0, so it's nothing. So that leaves you 6, 6, 6 in all directions, which again, bit of a coincidence maybe, but so we've got an esoteric magic square there. Symbolically is that 666 in every direction. So then the next bit that I came to have a look at was this window over here. Now this was really tricky to figure out what this window was, but it turns out that it was actually from an abbey called Tintern Abbey, made famous by a poem from a guy called Wordsworth, so a very, very famous literary figure from the UK, from Great Britain. So he wrote a poem called Tintern Abbey, which is just here. So it's Tintern Abbey by William Wordsworth. It's a very long poem, quite hard to read, quite hard to get your head around. And then it just so happens in the middle of that poem, and there's lots of this that is quite difficult to follow, but in the middle of that poem, it talks about in darkness and amid the many shapes of joyless daylight, sounds like lockdown, when the fretful stir, unprofitable, and the fever of the world. So fever of the world in the middle of COVID-19, a global pandemic. Just another interesting coincidence. But there we have the window of Tintern Abbey. Okay, so the next bit that I then looked at was this purple shape that was around the lighthouse from Margate. It took me a while to figure out what this was, but apparently this purple shape around the edge here is a bird's eye view of the Trafalgar Fountains. And it took me a little bit of looking into this to figure out what this link was. So I had a good read up on Trafalgar Square, a place that I walk through quite regularly in London, and there wasn't anything that was really obvious, and I thought, okay, so this is maybe just a bit of a tenuous link. But as I was scrolling through, I thought what was interesting is I got to the cultural references here, so we'll just see if you can see that. So in the cultural references, several scenes in the dystopian future of George Orwell's 1984 take place in where else but Trafalgar Square, which was renamed Victory Square by the story's totalitarian regime and dominated by the giant statue of Big Brother, which replaced Nelson. So there we have a representation of Trafalgar Fountains, which is one of the main features in Trafalgar Square. and also possibly a representation of Big Brother. So we have circles emanating out from a light source. Now, lots of people have said this relates to 5G masts. I'm not so sure about that, but maybe Trafalgar Fountains does relate to the dystopian future described in George Orwell's 1984, and maybe those signals emanating out are somehow to do with our total surveillance state that we're entering into. So that was the next bit that I've found so far on the £20 note. Now this one took me a little while longer, but you'll notice on the £20 note what you've got is 4 raised dots, then another 4 raised dots, then another 4 raised dots, and I thought they were really strange. But what I did realise quite early on is that 4 dots rang a bell for me that really stuck in my mind as something that I'd seen somewhere, and I couldn't think where it was, but it was something to do with COVID. And then eventually it sort of popped back into my mind that I'd actually read a while back this, which was about storing medical information below the skin surface. So specialised dye delivered along with a vaccine could enable on-patient storage of vaccination history. So this is from MIT News. So MIT, the world-renowned, world-famous higher education institution in the US. And when you scroll down and look, what you have is a 4-pronged injection of a vaccine, which you can see it there going into the skin, and you can see the 4 dots that show up under ultraviolet light, and that is the mark of the vaccine that proves that you've had it. So your medical record stored on your skin, and we've got the 4 dots there, and we've got the 4 dots on the £20 note. And as if that wasn't bad enough, what's also interesting is when you read in to this way of vaccinating, you find that there is actually something called luciferase that is used to make sure that ultraviolet light does show up. So this you can search this on a number of different sites. So this is all about the SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus vaccine research. Scroll down the page here, and at the bottom you will see that we have luciferase. So Lucifer in the title, and luciferase as our enzymes that use as a substrate as luciferin, and essentially used by scientists to provide a light output, which means that they are part of vaccines and help to make sure that they can be detected. So we've got the bearer of light, the painter of light. Lucifer is the bearer of light. We've got 666, and we've now got the 4 dots over here that look very similar to the storing of vaccine information on the skin using luciferase. So that's what I've found so far. So we've got the crown or corona and the virus. We've got Big Brother's Trafalgar Fountains. We've got a corona coming off a light emitting object from blue to red on the back. We've also got Tintin Abbey's window, which talks about a fever upon the world. We've got 666 in a esoteric magic square, and then finally we've got the 4 dots of the vaccine that uses luciferase to make sure that can be seen on the skin.